Participating in our last panel of today, we have Helmut Geisner, the Managing Director of Engineered Construction and Maintenance, Peter Long, Mayor of the City of Karratha, I'm just making sure I've got it in the right order, Steve Gostlow, the Managing Director of Toxfree, thanks very much Steve, the Honourable Brendon Grylls, Member for the Pilbara, thanks Brendon. Oh, is that me? There's someone
One of us is breathing too loudly.
Just spot you. Yes.
Not me, I don't think.
Dennis Criddle, the founder of Demil and non-executive director. I'm saying it like that because it's not decimal or decimal, it's Demil. And then we've got Peter Newbold, the director of Chameleon Resources. So thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining us for this last panel. So just like the last two sessions, in a moment I'll give each of you just a couple of minutes to talk a bit about what you're doing here and in terms of this panel and what your role is, not what you're doing here. Industry Service Providers is our panel for this last session. We've invited this sort of chocolate box of experts here today, if you like, because they work in industries that service the resources industry. They are at the coal front of the region's push to achieve greater economic growth and diversification. Or in the case of Brendon Grylls and Mayor Peter Long, they provide governance and leadership to ensure the best possible operating environment. So I have a general question that I would like to ask all of you. So let's get started with our first question. And Peter, I might start with you at the end there if you don't mind. How can government and industry work collaboratively to increase opportunities for local content, which is such a big issue across the whole of Western Australia? So local content capacity on major resource projects. So I suppose making sure that those local businesses get the best possible opportunity to be part of the process. How can government and industry work on that together?
I think it comes from both sides. Small business in its own, a lot of small business sit there in the town and don't put their hands up or don't float their own boat.
Yep.
And then they whinge because they don't actually do it. But on the other hand as well, a lot of the big project developers come into town and don't actually, it's only that we consider, or a lot of the companies consider they get the dregs once the major bit's gone. They might need a couple of pick and carry cranes or something, but it's all infrastructure work and it goes. It's small business itself has to put its hand up and go out and advertise itself and sell itself to the industry of big players, and it's naturally going to take its place.
And you also, as a small business, you have to help yourself as well. You know,
That's
put
correct.
yourself in the best position, get the best information, support, that you can to be, you're right, it's got to come both ways.
Yeah, I mean, another good thing for small business would be a bit more transparency. Like a lot of the resource projects, you'll ask a lot of the locals in Karratha,
Yep.
it'll come into town and start getting built, and a lot of people won't even know it's actually happening.
That's
So
a good point.
transparency from both sides would be really ideal,
Yep.
in that.
Thanks, Peter. Dennis, now we're not talking about the Dockers, because I'm an Eagle, and I know that you sponsor the Dockers, and I know that Brendan's some sort of crazy lunatic Dockers fan, so we're just not going to bring it up. All right?
Good.
Dennis.
Actually, I'm a founding member of the Eagles, so
Ah,
it's pretty
see.
tough business.
I knew I liked to.
But you quit that and came to the right side.
Right. I think there's a couple of points. First of all, I think mentoring small businesses and trades in Karratha to become better organised and managed, giving them the ability to compete and provide adequate services to any major resource project is critical. When you are a small business, it's a big step to get up there and put your name up to somebody. I remember the very first time we approached Woodside, I got kicked out the door. That was Neville Bowman, was the head of Woodside, and he said, "Look, we don't talk to little people. Go away." And you've got to be persistent and keep on keeping on at the major players to get your foot in the door. But when it does happen in a big way, and you have to be very, very sure of yourself and sure of what. Don't over-promise and under-deliver. One of the other ways, I think, from probably a medium-sized to large enterprises, which we're looking at the moment, is to, particularly with things like the state government, is look at public-private partnerships, which allow the government and the private sector to build key social infrastructure as required to attract and retain a sustainable workforce, a local workforce. And if you can utilise private sector funding and participation with government support and underwriting, this will help to accelerate development. And I think this is we're seeing this at the start of it now with the schools and other things, and I think it's a great way to try and promote the use of more local participants in those regions.
Thank you, Brendon.
I think, Kitty, sometimes the size of contracts actually precludes a lot of small business. I
Yeah.
think that's really challenging for them, and the companies that try hard are the ones who are breaking contracts up into smaller bite-sized pieces and actually intentionally trying to bring it. It does make it more difficult, it does make it more challenging.
It can also be government contracts too, it's not just...
I'm going to get to that because
yeah,
we're even worse.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I think there's so the companies, I think, need to understand that although that might be more difficult and more complex, it's easy just to hive it off to the big player and not think about it again. It buys enormous goodwill and social license to operate. And it's hard to put a value on that.
Yep.
When things go wrong, if you don't have much of a social license to operate, things go wrong big time. And so the opportunity of working hard, engaging with the local Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the like, I think just opens a few more doors. From government's point of view, we're bad at it as well. And what's happened in recent times is government is letting the contract to the big sort of major tenderer, and that major tenderer is subcontracting to the next level, and that subcontractor is subcontracting it again, and by the time we get to this point, any argument about local content or anything like that's well out the door. Because government's only got oversight up here, and you've got 3 steps that come underneath it. This is talked about all the time, and places like the Chamber of Commerce and Industry would be wary of government trying to bring more red tape in to get this right, which means that we rely on the major contractors and the companies help us get this right. Otherwise, governments come up with legislation to ensure that we get it right, and then you're all angry about it. This is an important thing in regional development. It's important in the community, and I would much rather have a way that we can manage it without government having their hands forced, and all of a sudden you've got an election commitment that says that this is how we're going to do it, and then we're having a red tape argument rather than a local content argument.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, Brendan, with some of the feedback I get from all over regional West Australia as far as business communities go is the batching of contract. You know, there's a few departments that will put 3 or 4 things together to make it into one, so then it goes over that threshold. So that does happen. So Steve, into that same question, so we're talking about, you know, how does government and industry work collaboratively to sort of, you know, ensure that there's as much local content. And I agree with the fact that it needs to come from both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. It's about transparency
Yep.
of the projects and better communication. I think that's the key to all of these things.
Yep.
You know, if we know what the resource companies are planning for the long term, they generally have 50-year type strategic plans, particularly oil and gas. They know what they're going to be doing. You know, there's other outside pressures on commodity prices and things that may change that, but if we know that they're planning to do something, the sooner we know about it, we can gear up and get our equipment and resources in place. What we saw, I guess, over the last sort of 10 years was that communication. As Peter said, you know, some stuff just started, and you know, you had to try and get people, and housing was, you know, going through the roof. So it was challenging, but I think small business as well. We were, I guess we're a medium-sized business now, but we started sort of in Karratha with, you know, 2 trucks and a couple of skip bins as Karratha mini skips, and in 2009 we managed to convince Woodside somehow to get the contract to manage their waste. And
Wow.
you know, it's a big effort, but you've got to, I guess, step up and take on the challenge. And you know, from a systems point of view, get some help. You know, there's a lot of government organisations to help you out there, and from our point of view, since that day we were awarded the Woodside contract. You know, our company's blossomed from that. So I think it has to be a bit of both. It has to be, you know, us doing our bit, and you know, from what we've heard from Helmut and Peter, you know, we're all doing our thing as best we can, and things are going okay.
Absolutely. And I think when you talk about the help, Steve, you know, there is a lot of incredible help that the government provides, lots of different programs and even advisors and different organisations, but organisations like your local Chamber of Commerce, you know, there's an amazing amount of expertise within that group, and all of the communities, your local council, all different organisations. So there is often the help out there, and they all, you know, everyone does essentially want their local community, town or city to be the strongest and best it can be, and how they do that is by having robust businesses. So everyone wants the businesses to do the best they can, so there is a lot of help out there, you're right. Peter, I think when we're talking about that, about what government industry can do. Local government often has, they're often the level of government, this is my view, that everyone deals with the most every day. Every day they're your city or your shire is the level of government that has the most impact on your life.
Yeah, I think it does.
Because they're the ones you deal with the most. So I think there's that opportunity. I know a lot of the City of Karratha has done a lot of work in encouraging the local business community, even supporting something like this today. So your comments on what government can do?
Well, I'd agree with the other guys here. My company was professional engineering and environmental consulting, and so it's slightly different. The first thing I think you have to convince the large companies that you're reliable and you can actually do the job. We're very different animals, small companies to the big companies. In small companies, you've got to earn your keep. You've got to, every hour you've got to make sure that you're earning some money. And often in the larger companies, they don't understand that. So there's got to be work from both sides to ensure that you have the procedures and things in place to make sure that you can actually work with the large companies. By the same token, once the large companies understand that you are capable of doing the work, I've found that they will stand by you because they realise that a local consultant or a local company is there 24/7, 365 days a year. My company's been called out on Christmas Eve because a conveyor got stuck out at Cape Lambert and we need someone to get out there straight away, and they can't find anyone up from Perth and everyone's on holidays. So we as local companies can do a real lot to help the large companies, and I think the larger companies and government needs to understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, and Helmut?
Well, I pretty much agree with Peter and the others.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of other issues, and as far as my company's concerned, we're still going through the process of accreditations, although we do have ISO and we're on Woodside's and Rio's books, but there is a perception issue. I think it's something we just need to keep working on and keeping our profile up there, but I see a key opportunity in actually partnering with other businesses that don't live in Karratha and have work and could do with local help.
Yeah.
I see that as an opportunity, and that's the advice I'd be giving to anyone else who's starting that journey.
Yeah, thanks Helmut, I agree. I have another question for the whole panel, I suppose. Has Karratha's transformation from mining town to a major regional city, has that impacted on the way that you do business? Like, is it harder, easier to retain staff, the housing pressures, that sort of stuff? Has the transformation impacted on your business or not? It's just...
I mean, Karratha was in such a... We've gone from one demographic to another. I mean, we had people paying $1,900 a week for a house, and it was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It had to change, it had to plateau when we had to get our prices down.
Yep.
And now we've got an oversupply where there's 240 odd houses for rent there at the moment, So no one's going to be happy at the moment. Oh, I've lost money on my house, or I haven't got a house, or whatever.
Market.
So you're not going to win that argument whether, as long as your bottom points to the ground, it's just going to be... But I think we just need to now, one thing I think needs to happen is trying to convince the major players, your Rios and your Woodside, to attempt somehow to reduce their fly-in, fly-out so we can get more people in the town buying a litre of milk, a gallon of juice, etc., and make the town be able to support itself, because at the moment I don't think we've got enough people there.
Yeah. So do you think that there's, business service gaps? What are the gaps in what's available locally to support that local community from your point of view? It's
that $99 question to convince families to come back to a region, and like in the old days where we all used to live there and families went fishing and everything. Because we were talking about it before, we are noticing a lot of mental health problems with fly in, fly out. So maybe it's a good time now to push for, try and get some sustainability back into the region so that we can get, people if you've got people buying things in a town, suddenly you need another shopkeeper, and it all helps.
Exactly.
But
and it's employment, and it's it's everything. It just keeps on rolling along, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So thanks, Peter. And Dennis, so that question that we asked first, it's really the transformation that Karratha's...
Yeah, from our
large construction company, amongst other things, and I think most of the stuff we do is project specific. So that means that, you know, we don't have that input. But what would attract us, number one, is cost. I mean, I lived in Karratha for 10 years. I was there when it went through the transition from being a small company to a larger size. And one of the big problems that occurred was the fact that whether it was the industrial relations scene or what it was, but we, when we lived there, always had the natural advantage of living there, and we cost less. What happened was, over a period of time, to live in Karratha it cost more, and if you lose your competitive advantage. No longer did the companies look for someone in Karratha because they could get someone better in Perth or Brisbane or somewhere else, and they worked it out. And you know, they changed the cycle of people working too, which made it more. It was easier to bring people in.
Yeah.
And companies and people are people, and they will always look for the easiest way out. So they went to the fly in, fly out. But you know, my thing is that the cost structure is still too high. People have to still, again, have to bite the bullet and accept the fact that, you know, as you said, that they're not going to get $2,000 a week for a house. Yeah. They're going to have to come back to the mean of whatever it is in Perth or somewhere like that, and make it competitive. That, you know, people don't have to pay, you know, the companies don't have to pay a huge amount to keep people there. Until that happens, I think we're going to be in a hiatus where people will still look to do the fly-in, fly-out option. And the other thing that's really important is the fact that I haven't been to Karratha for a couple of years, so I don't know, but I've been told by everybody, and in this symposium today, that there's been a huge increase in the health education, and it's easier to live permanently than it is to have fly-in, fly-out. So I think that's a major plus point for Karratha now, which has to be worked on, because, you know, I'm not a big favour of fly-in, fly-out. I'd rather live there. I lived there for 10 years. I loved it. It was the greatest time of my life. And, you know, that the work cycles did have a big effect on locals, where you were made to work 6 days a week, where you used to only work 5, 5.5, I went to 6, and they used to bring in the different cycles through. So it had a big effect on families, and families said, well, why are we living here? We may as well live somewhere else in Perth and enjoy ourselves, because you're never home.
And it can affect like the sporting groups and stuff as well. There's always conversation about that.
Sporting groups. So that's
Thanks, Brendon.
I think we treat too many people in the Pilbara as a labour unit rather than as people. They're people.
Yeah.
And every employer you talk to talks about their employees being the most important resource, and they're concerned about how's your wife going, how your kids going, school graduation. It's important. There's a family. Small businesses are successful when there's a family. And I think that we've just lost that a bit. And it's now about a labour unit, and how many extra hours can we squeeze out of that one labour unit before we have to give them a couple of days off, because that helps our efficiency.
Yeah.
And we've got that hard on the efficiency drive that these people are going, geez, I don't know if I can do it. And some people can, and they work damn hard and they make a lot of money. But I just don't know if that's a way of life or the real reason why you do it.
Yeah. And
if the model of living in a gated dormitory style camp was so successful, why aren't Alcoa doing it in Pinjarra? They're under price pressure. Why don't they move all of their workforce into a camp?
Yeah.
The reason they do it is because there's affordable accommodation in the region, and no one would dare believe or let that happen in a community like Mandurah. And my message to the bigger companies especially is that we're getting pretty close to the Mandurah stage, where we're questioning the need to have this as the rents normalise. And you're right, they have been too high, and there was an absolute need for the system that we had. And but now community leaders are calling for a transformation back to something that's a little more normal, and put workers onto shifts that are normal, and look for other ways to gain efficiency. If Australia's efficiency has to come from flogging to death, you know, hard-working miners and making them live apart from their families in gated camps, then are we actually getting this right? What do we do it for in the first place? What do we have economic activity for to try and achieve? So that would be my point, that there is a reason why this happened, and it was a failure by government, and governments of all persuasions can take the blame. There was a failure by companies to probably not give enough advance notice to government about what was going to happen. But we're now coming out the other side of that, and there's a real opportunity to be the first to transfer. And Yarra, Mark was here earlier. Yarra doing their tan plant, full residential workforce. So high skills, full residential workforce. My boys play cricket across the road with some Indian kids that are working on the tan plant. So the notion that you can't attract and retain is actually wrong. It was right 5 years ago, and whenever I hear people saying we would not be able to attract the workforce into the Pilbara, I don't think they're talking reality. No. You talk to Chris Adams at the council, used to advertise a job and get no applicants. He advertises the job at the city of Karratha now and 20, 30, 40 applicants. And as well as that, the high cost of providing accommodation for an employee. If any small business in Perth tried to make their margin work while paying the rent of their employee, it would explode every business in Perth. And yet somehow we've built into the Pilbara that that's how we do business. That there's an opportunity now, as rents normalise, that if you want to work in the Pilbara, you buy your own house or you rent your own house. And you get paid a salary from the company. That's normal. If you work for BHP in Worsley, you rent your own house. It doesn't come with a house, but you come to the Pilbara, it's a completely different, it's like we're a different world up there. We don't want to be a different world anymore, we want to be the same world as everywhere else. And I think today's been a really important way of showing that.
It has. Thanks, Brendon. Steve, there's another question that I wanted to move on to, and I think it's whether you think from your point of view, from your business point of view, are the regional cost pressures still impacting on your ability to be competitive in the local market? You know, staff housing. We've talked about, you know, that the house, the price of housing has gone down, but are those regional cost pressures impacting? And if so, what would you need to be competitive for the next 5 years, do you think?
Well, as Brendon said, housing's come down, which has been great. We employ about 100 people permanent in Karratha. And in the last 18 months particularly, about 100, round about, and probably about 80% of them are local, like permanent residents. And we've probably, in the last 12 to 18 months, since the housing prices have come down, and particularly the revitalisation of Karratha, you've got more families that actually want to live there. You know, you can go get a good coffee now. The water's good. It's you know, so that's definitely helped. So there's the two things. It's cost and being able to be competitive. We still find that our competitors, and even the pressure, I guess, from the miners at the moment on their cost pressures forcing down on ourselves as service providers, we're still finding that they like to talk that you know, having local people is important, but when it comes to price, it will still be cheaper at this point in time to fly in a fly out person. They get cheaper flights, they can get them up there easily, and you know, the wages aren't the same. So it is still, we're frustrated a little bit by that, but you know, the stuff around Karratha and the facilities that Karratha have now, and the Leisureplex, the Pelagio, all that kind of stuff is really helping us retain families in Karratha, and we think we get a better employee out of a local employee with their family, you know, being part of the community. Always. So we're a big supporter of it. Yeah, thanks, Steve. And Peter, on just that question on the cost pressures, you know, impacting on being competitive from a city point of view as well, is it? I know Chris talked about how he's got 40 more, you know, he'll now have all these applicants applying. So are you finding with the level of being able to run the city of Karratha, you know, it's more competitive for you?
Yes, definitely. Sometimes 90, I think we've had in a couple of our jobs, 90
it's good,
people applying, so it's certainly got a lot better. And $2,000 a week for a house down to $1,000 a week, it's a big difference, but nevertheless $1,000 a week is still $50,000 a year. To earn $50,000 a year, you need to earn $100,000 a year, so it's still expensive. It's getting better, but we're not there yet. We've got quite a distance to go. However, the process has started and it will keep going. I feel very sorry for the people in town who bought $1 million tin houses a couple of years ago, which are now worth $700,000. I really do feel sorry for those people. For businesses, it's different because they can write it off. But those people can hang on. They can keep those houses, and it's all happened before. The prices will go up in the medium term, and they'll get out of it. So they just need to hang in there as long as there's work. Through the 90s, we were in a time that wasn't booming at all, and my company and other companies kept going very well, and the price of houses just slowly went up. So things will get better that way, but we still need to go further to get the price of housing down.
And I think, Peter, with the house prices and it is buying a property in a resource-based community is a risk. It is can be a high reward buy. And I know over the years in Kambalda is a great example when nickel's gone up and down. So there's times in Kambalda, as I'm sure quite a few of you have been there, where houses have been $35,000, in the last 10 years. And then there's times in the last 10 years those same houses have been $450,000. That's the risk a bit, it is, you do feel bad, but it's also that's the market.
Yes, I think a lot of people just thought that the boom was going to go on forever.
Yeah.
But this was the biggest boom the nation's ever seen.
Yes.
Bigger than the gold rush of 1851. So we're on the shoulder now. It's going to hurt for a few years, but it'll get better.
Pretty amazing, amazing growth it's been. And Helmut, just that question again on from a local business perspective and from your business, are the local cost pressures still impacting on you and your ability to retain and keep staff and run the business, I suppose?
Well, the situation's definitely easing for us, and being a fairly small local contractor, when the squeeze was on, we were really in a lot of trouble. It was very, very difficult to attract skills and then keeping them when there was a lot of project work out there, and people, the locals, the skilled locals, took the easy path where they had guaranteed work, where, we lived pretty much hand to mouth, and it was a very, very difficult time for us. Yeah. But it is easing, and I think Peter's right, we've still got some way to go.
And I think, Helmut, one of the expressions that was said very earlier on today by one of our presenters was, the time now is we've got the time now to take a breath and get ready for the next stage. And I really like that expression because I know in a lot of resource based communities, and again, Kalgoorlie is one of them, but when things went really crazy prior to the GFC in Kalgoorlie, the businesses, the small to medium-sized businesses, were the busiest they'd ever been. Busy as in, couldn't employ enough people, couldn't pay high enough, didn't have enough jobs, but a lot of them actually didn't make any money because they lost control of the business. The growth, they spiralled out of control. So this is an opportunity to take that breath, and we're noticing that people are, planning their business a lot better and trying to be a bit more steady because, in the goldfields, we were all complaining about UMob and the Pilbara taking all our workers because it was, that's where everyone was going. So, it happens everywhere. Look, we've just got time. We've actually only probably got about another 5 minutes in total for this session. So maybe if each of you just wants to make a quick closing remark, we really appreciate that you've come today. And so I'm not sure if Peter, you want to start with just a few remarks about where things are at the moment and where you see it going in the next sort of year or so, I suppose.
Look, at the moment, I think from a local content for us, we are really looking at tenders, and if we think we have to outsource too much and carry too much debt on that job, we are looking at other ideas so we can mainly resource it ourselves and have little, because it's the work up there at the moment is very limited, as we all know. It's as we say, we're in a decline. It's not, so we're definitely doing that. As far as the housing goes, yes, we really need to get it down. But it's the old $99 question. Everyone then goes. We were lucky as a company. We built 3 complete staff houses about 5 years ago. We built them in the wrong time. They cost us a fortune, but we're not forking out rent. We're actually paying off an infrastructure for ourselves. So we're lucky in that respect.
Lucky and smart.
I think as businesses at the moment, I think we just got to all tighten our belts and ride out this wave and go forward when it's there.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Peter. Dennis, any final comments?
What was the question, Kitty?
Do you know there was no actual question? What it was
free kick.
Free kick.
It was,
Okay.
It was more a closing remark and where you see the next 12 months heading in Karratha.
Okay, closing remark. I think one of the things that did go by the by over the last 20 years has been the if you want to attract people to remote regions, they had a tax structure which would help to do that. That's all gone. And I think, you know, we heard in the other speakers talk about ways and means of having tax-free status and all that. The biggest drawback really is the cost of labour and getting people involved in business in there. And if you can give them an incentive to go up there and stay, you know, that's one of the things. But, you know, the number one thing really to attract people is to have good facilities. And what's happened in Karratha in the last 3 years has really given us the impetus to be able to do that. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, we were lucky. We started off when we were, you know, 40 years ago, 35 years ago. And we've built a company now which has got 1,000 employees and it's all over Australia. But, you know, to do that, you have to have a lot of luck on your side and to progress that through. But I've still got a very, very soft spot from Karratha. We still own a lot of property there. We still want to be a presence in Karratha. But at the same time, you've got to be competitive. And the whole of Australia's got to be competitive, not just Karratha. I mean, I spent 3 months in America last year and my God, we don't know how lucky we are in Australia because our cost structures here are way, way too high. And it's not just Karratha, I'm talking about the whole of Australia. So I think we're all in for a big, big shock in this country. And unfortunately, it's going to hurt a lot of people. But, you know, it's one of those things that happens. It's a cycle. And we've been through it. And I think one of the things we've got to do now is make the best we can of what we've got available. And I think Karratha's in a fantastic spot to be able to do that. Because things will happen. There will be more development. There will be more construction in Karratha. It's not going to go away.
No, thanks, Dennis. We've probably just got about a minute and a half left in total, Brendon.
No, I get a shot later, so.
Great.
Okay.
Steve?
I'm really optimistic about the opportunities in Karratha actually for us from a waste perspective. You know, we've got increasing iron ore tonnes going out, you know, more trains, more haul packs, increasing LNG production. We're going from 2 LNG plants to 4 with Gorgon and Wheatstone and Prelude and these things coming on. So, you know, we're investing technology to manage that waste locally on our Karratha site there, and the revitalisation that the state government and the city of Karratha have done is being magnificent. So, you know, housing people locally, we've still got to reduce our cost. It is still expensive, and we have got pressure from our major resource companies to cut our costs, and we're happy to pass those savings on. But, you know, we also, I guess, want the support for them to I guess encourage more people. You know, if we get more people in Karratha, you know, it's the old supply and demand. More, you know, costs will come down as more people get there. Transport costs, all logistics and things can be made more efficient. So, I think we need support from the major resource companies in that ambition too. But we're quite optimistic about the prospects for Karratha for the long term.
Here. Brilliant. Thank you. Peter, any final last words?
I'd like to endorse what the other speakers have said. I think Dennis is right. I think the whole of Australia's cost structure is too high, and things are going to be tough nationwide for the next few years, maybe a bit longer than that. Of all the places in Australia to be, I think Karratha is about the best place. I agree with Steve. There's lots of projects coming up. We've just got so much going our way. Government's been right behind the town. They've invested a lot of money. The large resource companies are reaping the benefit of that now, and having people coming up to wanting to come and stay with us. We've really got a bright future in Karratha. I think just a great place to be. And look, these are all local businesses that have started up here in Karratha, and now look at Dennis's. He's got 1,000 people, and he started with himself in Karratha 30 years ago.
Good story, isn't it? Thanks. Helmut, any?
Well, I'd like to finish on a very positive note.
Yep.
I think through the consolidation that's going to happen in Karratha, it'll present opportunities for the likes of my business. When the biggies leave town, they'll drop a few crumbs that we can pick up and develop, and then at the same time grow our capability and the personnel that I've got working for me. So I see it in a very positive light.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Helmut. And can you please put your hands together for our fantastic panel?